right, before I get started and as I get this presentation up, just by a show of hands, how many people know who Genesee in Wyoming is? So about 10–15%. So I guess I will have to go over who our company is. And that's really what I want to do today. I want to give you a brief overview of Genesee in Wyoming and then talk a little bit about our service offerings and how it integrates into everybody up here at the table, and then talk about some of the opportunities we see out in the marketplace. Genesee, Wyoming is a holding company that actually has 63 different railroads across the globe, most of those in the United States. We generate about $800 million a year in revenue. We are a publicly traded company. We have about a $2.6 billion market cap. We have 2,500 employees. We operate nearly 9,000 miles of track. In the state of Georgia, we're the third largest railroad, third behind Norfolk Southern and CSX. We have about 850 customers, and thank you, Mr. Bunch, for your business, and thank you, Mr. Pyron, for your business as well. And we do a lot of business on the port side, and you can kind of see that when you look at the rail services we provide. We have United States, Canada, Australia, and the Netherlands. Our operations in the Netherlands are basically solely port operations at the Port of Rotterdam and the Port of Antwerp. This is a map of our operations. It's probably going to be tough to see, but we have 9 operating regions. As I mentioned, most of our operations are here in the United States. We recently made an acquisition in Australia. You see the red line that runs up through the middle of Australia. We closed on that acquisition in December of last year, and that really gives us the first opportunity to actually move freight more than a couple hundred miles. That's a 1,400-mile track, and basically that railroad was constructed for intermodal business and will primarily be an export commodity rail line servicing the Pan-Asian marketplace. These are the ports that we serve. You can see we have a big port presence in the United States. We have 2 ports in Canada, and as I mentioned, the 2 ports in Europe. Obviously, the larger ports that we serve, Port of Savannah is our largest. The Port of Rotterdam is one of the global largest ports out there. It's a very different operation. If you were to go to the Port of Rotterdam and the Port of Savannah, a lot more industrial complexes along the port in Rotterdam, much more spread out. But you can see we do have a pretty good understanding of port operations. What we do for the ports is pretty simple. We provide on-dock rail services to really try to connect our steamship partners to the inland rail network. Our job is to do that as efficiently as possible. Our job is to do that as reliably as possible. And in the last 23 years, we have failed to serve a customer due to any failure in our network that was mechanically related. So, you know, we take reliability very, very much as a key factor in our success. You know, if we were to not operate and switch the port for 2 days, I'm sure we'd have a real issue. If we weren't switching a mill for 2 days, we'd have a real issue. So we have to be a very reliable service operation. The other thing that's critical is efficiency. Every time a container gets touched, it's an additional cost. And one of the most important factors to a port to make it attractive is try to keep that cost as low as possible. And that makes it more attractive to steamship companies, to receivers, and to shippers alike. So our job is to make sure we have a very efficient operation. And then last but not least is safety. That is really one of the tenets of our company. We want to make sure we run a very safe operation, because it only takes one accident, and the time OSHA gets in there, the Railroad Administration gets in there, you're actually shut down for a day. And we want to make sure we send our employees home every night, but more importantly, we want to make sure we can provide an efficient operation. We believe those 2 things go hand in hand. The opportunities that I'll talk about, and you've heard these from more than one person, is export growth. We service 16 different ports, and I will be the first to tell you, in many of our port operations, we are at capacity. There is not one bit of capacity left to do certain export commodities. On the West Coast ports, there's at least 12 commodities that I would consider bulk or natural resource commodities that really don't have a home to be exported today. They need more terminal capacity, and once that terminal capacity is built, we know there's receivers in the global marketplace that will take these commodities. If you go to some of the bulk commodity ports today, like Norfolk or Baltimore, we're exporting coal. Those facilities are completely sold out. Some of that's driven by market conditions. Australia had some major floods last year, and we're providing China coal needs and India coal needs right now. But it's amazing when you look at where we're going to be. To think we could go from a $1 trillion export market to a $2 trillion export market by 2015, which is our president's objective. You know, we have got to put more infrastructure in the ground. There's just absolutely no way we can do it. Bulk commodities, that kind of goes hand in hand with export growth. When you look at what we export as a country, some of the bigger commodities, particularly in the Southeast, is forest products, but also food and grain, minerals. Coal is a great resource we have. But in two terminals that we service that are grain-heavy terminals, there can be times of the year during harvest where we'll have 100 to 150 trains entering into an export facility. Those trains are 120 to 150 cars long, and they handle 20 to 30,000 bushels of corn per car or wheat. So you're talking about very, very significant amounts of export on the grain side. And really and truly, there's very limited capacity in those areas. Most of the investments today in those markets are from private investments, from Bunge, ADM, Cargill. They're actually putting the infrastructure in place at the ports that they choose to serve. Container stuffing and stripping. When the market was really hot and containers got short, you saw a lot of move to this to try to keep the containers closer to the port. But there was some unintended consequences when we started doing this. There was a natural shift to 53-foot domestic containers. You had more cubic capacity. It allowed domestic receivers to postpone some of their import decisions. As they import into a container, they'd have to keep that container intact. Now, if they strip it, they could actually postpone where they decide to shift that product. And I know Home Depot does that quite a bit today because it gives them a closer fingerprint pulse of what's going on in their supply chain. So we're seeing a big shift there. When you look at domestic containerization, Terry talks about additional truck capacity. If you look over the last 2 or 3 years, the major trucking companies in the United States have made monumental shifts to domestic intermodal. Domestic intermodal continuously grew from 2008, 2009, 2010, even in the midst of a significant recession. Domestic intermodal growth was double-digit, and that's driven by many things: highway congestion, fuel costs, driver shortages. So we see a great opportunity to continue to capitalize on that and leverage rail as an option. Inland ports and small market intermodal operations, that kind of goes hand in hand with domestic container shift. You heard a mention of Crescent Corridor today in one of the presentations. What they're looking at is how do we create an intermodal network that meets the needs of our customers, the shippers, the receivers, the retailers, the distributors, but also provide a network that can provide timely solutions and piggyback off the strengths of each mode. The trucking companies can provide first mile, last mile. The rail companies can provide longer lengths of haul over the road at a cheaper cost. So you have a network that basically pulls on each other's strengths and provides a more environmentally friendly, a more sustainable model going forward. And then the last opportunity is the Panama Canal, and I'm sure everybody's going to talk about that, or everybody knows about what's going on in the Panama Canal. But quite honestly, when you look at what the Panama Canal can do, you basically took what the LA dock work stoppage was, multiplied by a factor of 2, and that's what the Panama Canal can do to the East Coast. This is where the people are. This is where the ships would want to call. We have to be in a position to accept that. If not, you'll probably see short-term land bridging coming off the West Coast still, or you'll see other ports that do have the ability to have these ships call on them, probably grow faster than Savannah, so we need to make sure we support Savannah in whatever efforts they need to get the deepening of the port done. If not, I'm a firm believer freight is just like water. It takes the path of least resistance, and if we don't have the most efficient and effective supply chain to offer for that freight, it will move to a different place. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark